July 13th. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Ramsey.
Here.
Mayor Pons.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Here.
Ms. Kernscher. Here.
Your packet is the minutes from June 8th. Are there any changes, corrections, alterations? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the minutes of June 8th be approved.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher. Aye.
Next on the agenda is a matter of special privilege, and so we have the pleasure today to recognizing Nick Rubino. Would you join me at the podium, please? Nick, I guess first I'm supposed to chastise you for getting Caleb into tennis and then putting him on the IR list.
That wasn't me.
It's all my fault.
Well, thank you, Nick, for being here. So, Nick Rubino serves as the athletic program coordinator with the Williamsburg Parks and Recreation Department. Since joining the team, he has been a driving force of excellence. He gives himself unselfishly, putting the needs of the department as well as the community before his own. To ensure his program participants experience the Williamsburg way, he has numerous times filled in as a scorekeeper, referee, umpire, coach, gym attendant, so that games could be played on schedule. Additionally, he serves as a Spanish translator for the city's future festivals. Nick approaches each day with a positive attitude, all while continuing his efforts to make the city of Williamsburg an even better place to live, work, and play. So accordingly, Nick Rubino is hereby recognized for his dedication to excellence in keeping with the traditions of the public service in the city of Williamsburg. So that's signed by the city manager and I. A little appreciation there and a plaque for you. So we're going to turn and take a picture.
I'll keep it super short. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. I'd also like to thank my parents for being here and for their support. I'd like to thank my department head, Robbie Hutton, my supervisor, Taryn Sherrill, and all of our wonderful Parks and Recreation staff. It truly is an honor and privilege to work for the City of Williamsburg. So, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is a public hearing, which is public hearing PCR number 23-014, the consideration and action regarding the special use permit at 301 Scotland Street, Matthew Whaley School, to allow a detached outdoor walk-in freezer in the rear yard. Ms. Griffin.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Pons and members of City Council. As you said, the Williamsburg-James City County Public Schools is requesting a special use permit to place an outdoor walk-in freezer at Matthew Whaley Elementary School, located at 301 Scotland Street. Meal preparation demands have increased at the school, and with that, there is a need for more cold storage space. The existing indoor freezer and cooler will be replaced with a larger indoor cooler, leaving no space for the freezer. The proposed outdoor walk-in freezer will be approximately 19 feet 3 inches long, 9 feet 8 inches wide, and 8.5 feet tall. The freezer will be located in a portion of the existing loading area on a new concrete pad, and is approximately 500 feet from Lafayette Street. There are certain uses that, if not regulated, may have an inadequate or adverse impact on adjacent property and the surrounding neighborhoods. To ensure that this does not happen, the special use permit process is used to determine if a use is compatible with the neighborhood and with the zoning district and with design. I'm going to look at first 3 criteria that we use, and we've done this so many times, you know by now that there are 6. So, the first 3 are, is a use in harmony with the adopted comprehensive plan? Is it in harmony with the intent and purpose of the zoning district? And is it in harmony with the character of the adjacent properties in the neighborhood? Looking at the comprehensive plan, the land use designation is public and semi-public. This generally includes municipal centers, buildings, and lands, the courthouse, and public and private schools. Therefore, we do know that this use is compatible with our comprehensive plan. In regards to the zoning district is our single-family dwelling district, our RS3 zone, and this is why we're actually here for the special use permit. This portion of the zoning ordinance requires that a public school or private school get a special use permit. So therefore, Matthew Whaley is asking and requesting this permit in order to put up the accessory building. And lastly, character. Is this use in keeping with the character of the neighborhood? We know that Matthew Whaley has been in existence for years. It is a part of the fabric of the community, so we believe that this freezer will not negatively impact the character of the neighborhood. And we'll talk about the design later, and you'll see more about that. The last three approval criteria deal with adequate public services, that it will not cause destruction or damage to any ecological or scenic or historical places of significance, and that it will be sited and landscaped properly. Looking at public services, we do know that this will not be an issue. There's adequate public services here already. The only thing that this will require are permits from our co-compliance office. This property is in the AP1 district, so it did require the approval of the design by the ARB. This was ARB 23-050. The ARB met on April the 11th of 2023 and unanimously approved this request to include landscape screening. Site plan. The Site Plan Review Committee, made up of members of the Planning Commission, reviewed this application at their May 17th, 2023 meeting, and they did recommend approval based on the site plan review. The site plan review also went through the various departments, and there were no issues with the site plan. The Planning Commission therefore approved this request at their June 14th meeting, and staff is also recommending approval of this request. We believe that it meets all of the 6 criteria outlined in the zoning ordinance to approve a special use permit. We do have Jim Falzone. He is a supervisor for facilities and capital projects for the school system, and he's here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. I do, and before we go to comments, statements, we do have a public hearing, but I do have a question. So what's changed? Obviously, I know that the school is at capacity and beyond, so there's more students there, so I can see that there's more food needed to be stored to serve students. And is that the root of the issue, is just because there's just more students eating at school versus when I was a kid there at Matthew Whaley, bringing my own lunch? I mean, do you have any idea? In our preliminary talks, it wasn't really described specifically, but from what we know, there is more demand on meal preparation, on how the meals have to be prepared, and then there wasn't enough storage, cold storage, for the meals being prepared. So they're asking that they have a freezer outside instead of inside because there's not enough capacity. I think Mr. Falzone can answer that question probably more specifically.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thanks for hearing me today. As Ms. Griffin said, I'm Jim Falzone. I'm the facilities manager for the schools. We have seen increased meal production due to just increased enrollment and increased numbers of free and reduced lunches. But probably the biggest thing has been, about 2 years ago, we initiated or we enrolled in a program with the FDA called the Community Eligibility Provision. I want to make sure I get that right. I haven't seen the data from this past school year, but the previous school year we saw meals go up about 40% just from that program alone. That program essentially makes all meals free to all of the students at that school. That's breakfast, lunch, after school snacks, and sometimes dinners. So, yeah.
Yeah, then it makes perfect sense. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Vice Mayor. And you stand there, he may have more for you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, thanks.
None for me.
Either. Thank you, Ms. Griffin.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. All right, I will go to the public, open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come forward and speak to this, they're welcome to do so. Yes, sir. If you would just state your name and address for the record. Yes, sir.
My name is Bob Wilson. I live at 22 The Palisades in the Port subdivision. My wife and I moved to the area about 2 years ago. And we both went to William and Mary and, loved the area, so we thought we'd come back. I guess I'm here today. This was my first city council meeting, and I suspect it won't be my last. A couple months ago, I sat in the auditorium over there, last fall, and heard a couple of prospective candidates talk and what your visions for the future was. And then a couple months ago, I sat in a meeting regarding the Spotswood rezoning. And I listened to the facilitator, and they went through, talking about the proposals. And he really urged us to stay focused. This is going to be a transparent process. Let's focus on the process. Let's not make villains of anybody. And then, the Freedom of Information Act information came out. And all of us were dismayed. We've been around the block, right? We've all had careers. We understand what it means when you're meeting privately with the developer before the rezoning application is submitted. And to borrow a phrase from the story of the Patriot, we're not so meek and pusillanimous to accept the explanation that this is the normal way of doing business, right? So I think we're disappointed. We'd like to know what the motivation of the city manager was to mediate those meetings, and why only one member of the council saw the danger in doing that and repeatedly refused to do it. So that's why I'm here. I want to follow the process through. I appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you. This is a public hearing on the refrigerator, Matthew Whaley. Did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
What's that?
This is a public hearing on the refrigerator, Matthew Whaley. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I support it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come to speak on the matter beforehand? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and come back to council for further consideration, discussion.
Yeah, obviously, they've identified a need for the freezer. I went out to the site, and I think with the location and the screening that's being required, that it'll be almost invisible to public view once that screening's mature. So I think need to approve it to support our school system.
Yes, likewise, as a mother of a former Matthew Whaley Patriot as of last month, he's moving on to be a Berkeley Bulldog, but I'm very familiar with that area, exactly where it's going to be, and I think that like the Vice Mayor said, it makes a lot of sense. And I do think, and I'm glad that this was raised, that this is kind of, we see this as an implication, it's like a reminder that Matthew Whaley is a school where all the children are able to get a free and reduced meals, and it's not based, there's no every child. And I think those are particular guidelines that make us in our school eligible for that. So I think that we see an impact of that, and so it is a reminder of that in our community and how important that is. And so if this is a consequence of that important program, then absolutely, I think it's a necessary change.
And I'm in favor of it as well. Over the years, we have approved learning cottages for Matthew Whaley to signify that their enrollment has expanded quite a bit. So to me, it only makes sense that the need for additional meal preparation follow as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said. It's a significant setback from the road. As said, it isn't going to be visible. It also is a larger piece of machinery. I'm sure would have the necessary security precautions to keep actual students away from the area. So fully in support.
Okay, as am I. Somebody like to make a motion?
So in accordance with Article 1, Administration Division 2, Section 21-42, I recommend that City Council approve the request submitted by Williamsburg, James City County Public Schools for a special use permit to place an outdoor walk-in freezer in the rear of Matthew Whaley Elementary School.
Second.
Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, takes us now to reports, and first we have the monthly financial statement. Ms. Dameron. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Each month when I give a financial report, it is truly a snapshot at a point in time. I really want to stress that this month since it's the June 30th. However, our numbers won't be finalized until we finish the closeout process. And throughout that process, we'll be accruing both revenues and expenditures The most significant revenues will be an additional month of meals and lodging, 2 months of sales tax, and of course, our water and sewer revenue. As well, we will record invoices that we receive up until the end of August that relate back to goods and services provided in the previous year. We also have the school surplus to book and deferred revenues and just several other closing entries. However, having said that, I think I have some good news to share and a very promising report. I'm looking at the general fund revenues. Our current real estate tax has exceeded the budget by 2.5%, or $381,000. Penalty and interest is over budget by $133,000. About $76,000 of that relates to property taxes, and about $56,000 relates to meals, lodging, and business license. Recordation exceeded budget by $86,000, and as of June, lodging has exceeded the budget by $60,000, and we have another month of revenue to be recognized. If the revenue for June activity is at least level with what it was for June the previous year, I would anticipate the total revenue for that for lodging would be about $3.8 million, or $435,000 over budget. Likewise, meals tax is currently close to $8 million, or about $193,000 over budget. If revenue for June activity is again at least level with last year, and I really think looking at trend data, I would anticipate it to be more. But if it's at least level, our total for the year would be around $8.8 million, and that's about $1 million over the budget. Permits are currently at $290,000 over budget, and that's primarily due to building permits, plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. Court fines and forfeitures are running under budget. I think we've spoke about that throughout the year. It looks like it's going to come in about $63,000 under budget. Street and sidewalk revenue from the state exceeded budget by $300,000. In total, general fund revenues before transfers exceeded budget by $1.9 million. Now, after the transfer, which is basically the transfer from the ARPA fund, we're about $2 million under the budget. And we've talked about that really since last December, when we realized that there was a timing difference in the reporting of our ARPA transfer. So we were anticipating just from that one transfer being $3.7 million under the budgeted revenues. So coming in under $2 million, we're basically 1.7 to the good, if that makes sense. Revenues are came in under expenditures at this point. So as of June 30th, there's about a $300,000 decrease in reserves. Overall, general fund expenditures as of June 30th are under budget by $2 million. And as I stated earlier, we will continue to accrue some additional both revenue and expenditures as we continue to make those adjusting entries through the year-end process. But I don't anticipate there to be any problems. I don't foresee any surprises. In the capital improvement plan, sales tax is currently at $4.7 million, and we still have 2 months to yet to be recorded. Looking at trend data, I would anticipate that those accruals may generate about $600,000 to $680,000. That would put us about $400,000 over our budget if those results are in line with trend data. In the tourism fund, the 1% sales tax is currently at $2 million, which is about $130,000 over budget. We still have 2 more months to be recognized there as well. I would anticipate around $300,000 more there. Currently, the $2 lodging tax is almost $900,000, which is close to being level with budget. We have another month of that to recognize, and that should put us slightly ahead of budget. And then in the utility fund, we have additional water and sewer revenue to recognize as it's collected. We also have to consider the allowance for doubtful account estimates to calculate and book. But looking at trend data and billing reports, I anticipate revenue for water will be just slightly under budget, while the sewer revenue will come in over budget. Just keep in mind, Since we collect the sewer revenue on behalf of the Hampton Roads Sanitation District, we have an offsetting expenditure line for the pass-through of that revenue to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District. Currently, the fund has excess of operating revenue over expenses of $1.3 million. A portion of that will be drawn to support the CIP, capital improvement and expenditures. This basically concludes my report. We'll continue to work to complete the closing process between now and the time that the auditors come back, which will be the week of September 19th. Shortly after their review, we'll finalize the report. We'll meet with the audit committee, and then we'll present to City Council with the annual comprehensive financial report in December. However, in the meantime, we will keep City Manager Trivet and City Council informed if there are any significant changes. So.
Good, thank you. I appreciate the comprehensive report. I'm glad that everything seems to be in order and revenues exceeding expenses, and so we're doing well. Mr. Vice Mayor?
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Dameron.
No questions, thank you.
No questions for me. Thank you.
None for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. Okay, next is monthly departmental operating reports. Mr. Trivet, anybody in the
Thank you,
barrel?
Mayor. We're going to have Economic Development come up and talk to us about the improvements to Prince George Street.
Wonderful. Wondered why she wasn't sitting way in the back like normal.
All right, so thank you so much, Mayor Pons and members of City Council, for allowing me time on today's agenda to give an update on this exciting project. So as a reminder, this project is in the city's current slate of GIOs under Innovating a Modern City, with direction from council to staff to convert the successful outdoor dining on Prince George Street to a permanent solution. Before we get into the details of how we are going to be moving forward with this project, I wanted to give a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today. So in 2020, the CDC restricted indoor dining for all restaurants across the country, and the city wanted to do whatever we could to help support our businesses during that time. So an emergency order was put in place which allowed for private outdoor dining on the public right-of-way. A lot of good came from that emergency order. The street was activated, our restaurants had increased seating and serving capacity, which ultimately led to increased revenue for them during the pandemic. Here are the current conditions of what's out there right now. So here we have the 500 block in front of Amber Ox, a shot from the other side, as well as an interior of what they have to provide. On the other side of the 500 block, this is in front of the Houndstail Corner Barkery. And then we have the 400 block in front of Memory Group, Retros, and Aromas. The design was completed in-house and was dreamt up by our city engineer, Aaron Small, with the renderings completed by our multimedia designer, Michael Lewis. We researched best practices across the state for allowing private dining inside of the public right-of-way, and then planning director Tavia Griffin and I held stakeholder meetings with the businesses along the block to keep them informed of the progress. So a couple of notes on this new semi-permanent outdoor dining plan. There are no proposed changes to the layout, so it will be a same-for-same replacement of what is on the street now. And that was a layout that was approved by a team of engineers and public safety officials back in 2020, and there are no concerns over fire route access or anything like that. Here are some renderings of what we are proposing. So this is the shot in front of Amber Ox. Is there a, oh, no. That is not a pointer. So that gray strip that you see between the sidewalk and the bump out itself will be a grate to allow for water to pour through. A curb will be poured with concrete, and then a brick will be installed to create the bump out. Another shot in front of Amber Ox on the 500 block. And here's a shot of the 400 block in front of Retros and Aromas. So when we held the stakeholder meetings, we gave the businesses two options. They could either rent the outdoor dining space directly in front of their storefront for $5 a square foot, which would allow them to restrict access to their customers only, and decorate and furnish the space with ARB approved furnishings. Ms. Griffin is putting together a design guidebook to allow the restaurants to see what kind of furnishings might be approved by the ARB. If they chose not to rent that space, then it would become public seating. The city would put out tables and chairs similar to what's found on Duke of Gloucester Street. It would be a public space, so they couldn't restrict it to their paying customers only. So there is $250,000 in the capital improvement plan budgeted for this project. It's going to be completed in-house by our very talented Public Works team that just finished up the Francis Street sidewalk. They anticipate that each bump out will take about 3 to 4 weeks to complete. The first will probably be the bump out in front of the Amber Ox, and then the Hound's Tail bump out would likely follow right after. The bump outs will be completed one at a time, so it won't all be started at once. The sidewalks will remain open during construction, and snow fencing will be placed for pedestrian safety along the sidewalk. It won't encroach onto the sidewalk further than the tree wells, and then based on input from the business community, the 500 block opted to have the work completed over the summer after the July 4th holiday, so they'll be able to start work later this month, and the 400 block chose to have the work completed in January after Public Works is done with tree collection. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So obviously there was great support by most of at least the majority of the businesses down there.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I don't have any specific questions, and maybe some comments later if anybody else has questions.
On the one rendering, is that darker area?
Yes, so the idea is that if an area becomes public seating, then it will be identified as being just brick. If a business chooses to rent the space, then the blue stone will be inlaid in the center to identify that it's a rented space.
Okay, that answered my question, is how we differentiate between public space and rented space.
And for the restaurants that are choosing to rent the space, it's largely around ABC, so being able to serve alcohol outside, they'll have to put up a boundary, and so they'll need to be able to rent the space in order to do that.
Yeah, and obviously, as you stated in your presentation, this was advantageous to the businesses, and I think we're all excited about the response we had and able to help the businesses through COVID. But I certainly think this rendering is more aesthetically pleasing than what we have there as temporary now. Thank you.
My only question was about the support of the businesses there, and it sounds like they are embracing this opportunity. So wonderful, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I think all of us who have been involved with this for the past couple of years are anxious to see it move forward. I did have a couple questions. So just to confirm that the layout will stay the same as well as the parking that's already there for the 500 block. So
Currently, that's the
there's
plan.
no changes there. And when you mentioned that there would be a boundary around those who rent the space, is that something that we approve, what kind of boundary it is?
That would be part of the ARB. ARB approval, correct, Tavia? Yes.
And will there be signage as well to alert people? Because a lot of people aren't probably going to know the difference between the bluestone and the red brick.
Correct, so yes.
And when you say semi-permanent, can you help us understand exactly what that means?
I would be glad to ask Aaron Small to answer that question. Hey, Aaron. An explanation of the semi-permanent part of the plan.
Okay, you just want a definition of how is it semi-permanent?
Right, because, I mean, when you look at it like that, it looks like it's permanent.
I say semi-permanent because we're actually not going to pull up any of the asphalt that's there.
Okay.
What we're going to do is cast the concrete curb directly on top of the pavement, and we're going to pin it in so that, it doesn't move. And then we're going to place sand directly on top of that. It'll be bordered completely with the concrete curbing. And then with the sand on top of the pavement, then we can use the brick pavers and the bluestone pavers. on top of that. So that if we ever had to, we can then pull it right back up and we've got asphalt underneath.
So if we ever had another house to move down Prince George Street, we'd be able to do that.
The house moving, I'd probably just put a few 4x4s down and let
Okay.
them go right up on top.
Okay. Thank you. I was just wanted to sort of understand that a little bit
Yes,
better.
it doesn't change how that road works, but it will be converted into called a more permanent one-way street.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Yuri, and for all of your coordination with the businesses. It's wild to me that it was 3 years ago that we were starting to pursue this kind of option. That just time flies in that way, but I'm excited to see a potential permanent solution. Right now, there are mullions separating the street from the seating area. I remember originally they were more tubular and concrete, and we spruced them up a bit, so they're planters on top. I don't see them in this rendering, but I am concerned about safety for people sitting there with cars driving by. So will those mullions be replaced to buffer the area?
So my understanding is that Amber Ox and Houndstail on the 500 block will be putting in ABC barriers of some kind, so that would provide some visual protection or some visual cues to drivers passing by. And then the 400 block would like to keep the benches out. So there were benches placed in between the planters in their bump out. They'd like to keep the benches there as another visual reminder to drivers.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder too about, maybe this is a business by business decision, but just for the safety too of folks either in the private or public spaces that are sitting there. I don't know if the ABC barriers are also, crash certified, right, for someone who's texting and driving, but those concrete mullions we have are very particularly meant to keep cars from going into that area. So I'd ask that we consider the structural integrity of whatever buffers we use, not to impede people getting into those spaces, but just in case of an errant driver or a mistake, to protect someone who may be enjoying their lunch.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second one was $5 per square foot. Is that a yearly rent?
$5 a square foot per year, correct.
Per year. Okay, all right. That was my question. Thank you.
Well, Yuri, thank you. I really applaud all the work that you've done and certainly applaud the community for supporting this outdoor dining activity. And it is hard to believe it's been 3 years since we engaged in all of this. And so I see this continuation of doing something more semi-permanent, continues enhancing the vibrancy and just making the whole area much more lively. This and on top of what's been done on Duke of Gloucester Street with the city providing those chairs and tables and umbrellas out there, really just, I think, changes the whole atmosphere of the area and just makes it more user-friendly. So I really appreciate what I see here, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, you have anything to top that? There'll be public comment.
This particular issue?
Public comments, open forums next, so I'll let you know when that comes. You can say whatever you'd like to at the public comment.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney report?
Nothing today.
Okay, so now we have an open forum. Mr. Wilson, would you like to come forward and speak on that? You have 5 minutes, sir.
Getting the hang of this now.
Yeah,
Do I need to reintroduce myself?
I got you. Bob Wilson, 22 Palisades.
On the outdoor dining, one of your points is on public safety. This has come up in a lot of areas where we're renting the space to for-profit organizations and that type of thing. One of the things that came up in Annapolis is who carries the liability for slips, falls, and accidents? Does the establishment indemnify the city, or is the city responsible for those types of things?
Yeah, those are good questions. I'm glad our city attorney's here to take notes and make sure that all works out the way it should.
And I think I made my point with respect to the rezoning, so.
Yes, sir, you did.
I appreciate it.
All right, you're certainly welcome. Thank you for coming forward. Would anybody else like to come forward during the open forum? Seeing none, I'll close the open forum and we'll move on to unfinished business. First is item A, consideration and action concerning the memorandum of agreement between the funding partners of the Williamsburg Regional Library established the timeline for funding of the 2 new library facilities. Mr. Trivet.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were hoping to have this ready for the city council to approve today, and
Robbie's next.
Okay.
I think Ms. Hutton was excited to participate in the library discussion. So anyway, we've prepared this MOA, we've sent it around to the funding partners, and James City County has asked us to give it a little bit more time while they consider what's in the MOA as well as consider what's in the contract itself. And so we would ask City Council to table this again this month.
Yeah, I think that's a fair consideration. No sense in us signing something that they're not going to sign, so we will table it for another month or so. Okay. All right, new business.
They need to
Do we need to vote to table that?
Someone needs to make a motion to table
Somebody
it.
like to make a motion to table that? agenda?
So I move that City Council table the MOA between the Williamsburg City and funding partners for the Williamsburg Regional Library.
Second.
Okay,
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
aye?
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Okay. I think everybody's on the same page now. Robbie, you're next. So that's new business, consideration and action to update the Kiwanis Park tennis court lights.
Now I'm not excited anymore. So. All right, good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. Upgrading the Kiwanis Park tennis court lights is a project funded through the FY23 Capital Improvement Plan. The lights that are out there now are a Musco Sports Cluster metal halide system that was installed in 1995 and has exceeded its lifespan. The ballasts are noisy, which is a distraction to the players and the spectators, and the light levels have depreciated, casting shadows down on the courts, which can make it difficult to see. Upgrading from a metal halide lighting system to an LED system will provide consistent light levels and uniformities. The Musco LED retrofit solution that's been specifically designed for Kiwanis Park will provide an average of 50-foot candles, which is in line with competitive play, the level of light of competitive play. And with Musco's hooded visor technology, it'll be streamed light, and it will be minimal glare and no light spill. And the other advantage of upgrading to an LED is there is going to be an estimated 50% energy savings with this project. This project comes with a 25-year maintenance-free warranty, and we will still control still operate the Musco Control Link monitoring system. Musco is a sole source provider, and we will also be using a cooperative purchasing contract, and the total for this project is $170,617. I'd like to thank you for your time and your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. So there's a 25-year warranty, is that what you said?
Yes.
So these lights will last that long?
Yep, so what will happen is anytime anything goes wrong, a light bulb needs to be changed, the contractor will come out and do that. Currently, the lights that are out there, they were installed in 1995, that a 7-year warranty with them, and so when the lights go out, we have to enlist the help from the fire department and go up in a bucket truck and change the lights. So Musco will do that for us for the next 25 years.
I think it's all, at least in my experience with metal halide, I mean, those are more expensive fixtures, light, they're more expensive to operate, but also just the cost of replacing and repair is pretty substantial for those, versus the LED. So I think this is a good move.
Thank you, Ms. Hutton. Could you talk, one thing I think we often forget is just maybe because where they're located, that how much those courts get utilized and the reasoning for having the lighting, because they are a big part of the community.
Sure. So we operate, we offer youth and tennis programs and for the community, just not specifically the city of Williamsburg. And they're highly used. James City County Parks and Rec, they converted all of their tennis courts to outdoor pickleball courts. And so the community members that had been using those courts now come over and use Kiwanis Park courts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Just appreciate this work, and sounds like it's going to be more efficient on several levels. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the information and the presentation. I'm glad to see us continue to improve Kiwanis over the past few years with the accessibility program that we did there, now the lights, and fourth softball field, that it's nice that, it's really becoming a lot more broader in its appeal. The only question I had was, assuming that we approve this, what do you foresee as the time period for installation?
Yes, so once approved, it'll take about 12 weeks for them to build the product, and what we'll do is we will coordinate installation in between our tennis seasons. So we won't, the courts won't be out of service too very long. So there's usually a break in between seasons, and so we will sneak it in there.
Okay, and I did have to think of one other question. You mentioned that a contractor would be available to come change any light bulbs or do that. How local is that contractor?
Right, so their preferred electrician is Brandon Electric, and they are based out of, it's either Chesapeake or Norfolk.
Okay.
And so they usually, once the call ticket goes in, it's usually within 48 hours.
Oh, okay, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the presentation, Director Hudden. I'm also in support. Anecdotally, I've used these courts significantly. I was a part of the tennis league that Nick actually helped organize, and almost always our games go into the evenings, and the lights are helpful, but obvious that they're a little bit older. It's interesting to know that they're out of warranty. So for the cost, for the 25-year warranty, I'm excited to support. But just from your comments, I'd be more skeptical if any City of Williamsburg tennis courts were transitioned into pickleball courts in the future. For reference.
But regarding the conversion of James City counties to pickleball, I think it's just another good example of a great partnership that we have with James City County and the Parks and Recs. So look forward to continuing. Thank you, Ms. Hutton. So we need to make a motion and
Yes, of course, considering that the current lights are older than one city council member here, but anyway.
why you got to pick on me? Now your time.
So I move that city council authorize the city manager to execute a contract in the amount of $170,617 for the Kiwanis Park Tennis Court Musco LED retrofit project.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay, takes us to the next item, which is consideration and appointment to boards and commission. Mr. Vice Mayor, I believe you have a motion.
Yes.
Go by real quick.
Please, this is a lengthy motion, so please bear with me. I move that City Council reappoint Wendy Evans to the Colonial Behavioral Health Board of Directors for a new term ending June 30, 2025. Reappoint Andrew Trivet and appoint Jeremy Tia to the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board for new terms ending on June 30, 2026. Reappoint Wendy Evans to Colonial Juvenile Services Commission for a new term ending June 30, 2027. Reappoint Robert Whaley to the Economic Development Authority for a new term ending June 30, 2027. Appoint Larry Snyder to the Old Town Medical Center Board for a new term ending June 30, 2025. Reappoint Andrew Trivet to the Quarterpath Community Development Authority for a new term ending on July 31, 2027. Reappoint Wendy Evans to the Social Services Advisory Board for a new term ending June 30, 2027. Reappoint Susan Corbett to the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission for a new term ending on June 30, 2026. Reappoint Scott Spence, the ARB representative, Barbara Ramsey, City Council representative, Pat Dent, City Council representative, Sally Wolf, Tourism Development Grant Review Committee representative, Harold Phillipson, EDA representative, Connor Sokolowski, Planning Commission representative, and Robert Curry to the Williamsburg Public Art Council for new terms ending June 30, 2025. And reappoint Christopher Garros to the Williamsburg Regional Library Board of Trustees for new term ending on June 30, 2027.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Takes us to the item C, is consideration of proposed resolution 23-09, recommending to the Circuit Court the appointment of George Liakos to the City of Williamsburg Board of Equalization. Ms. Shelton?
So the Circuit Court makes these appointments and City Council makes recommendations to the Circuit Court. This is a reappointment of an already seated member whose term expired on June 30th. I have asked City Council to do this as a resolution because it makes it easier to submit the paperwork to the court.
questions? Like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council adopt Resolution 23-09, recommending the reappointment of George Liakos to the City of Williamsburg Board of Equalization for a term beginning on July 1, 2023, and ending on June 20th? 30th, 2026.
Second.
Ms. McKay, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay, takes us to item D, consideration and action to confirm the purchase of 367 East Rochambeau Drive and 811 Greg Lane for a total acreage of 68.4 acres and a total price of $935,000 to help protect the Watermill watershed. Mr. Trivet?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. As you all know, we have a long history as a city of protecting the watershed for the Watermill Reservoir, and that's really a major factor in the fact that the water treatment facility and the resultant water that we produce is regularly awarded the highest award in the business for quality. And we want to continue that trend, and so to do that, we monitor properties that come up for sale along the watershed and try to analyze what the development potentials might be and what the threats might be if they became developed or changed uses from what they are now, or even continued the use that they are now. And recently we've had the opportunity to consider two purchases. The first is 801 Greg Lane. That is on the Moortown Road side of the reservoir, and it is 50 acres, and the other one is 367 East Rochambeau Drive. That is on the, obviously, the Rochambeau Drive side of the reservoir, and it's 18.84 acres. And coincidentally, they came up for sale roughly at the same time. We were approached and decided to bring that forward to City Council. So in our assessment, again, we believe that these are two vital properties that would help us protect the long-term quality of the water and make treatment easier and therefore less expensive and also more readily available. And so our recommendation to City Council is we proceed with purchase. The funding for the purchase will come from the utility fund, as it always does.
Thank you, Mr. Trivet. So as we look at the map, and I don't know if you can put the presentation up that shows the two parcels.
It's in the agenda.
But what strikes me again about these two parcels is that they seem to be at the head of a lake, at each finger of the lake. Yep. And so I think they are very strategic properties that if they were sold for development would have a real adverse effect on our watershed, and again kind of go against our policy to protect the lake from contaminants and other stuff happening to the water. So I support the purchase of these two parcels.
Yeah, I think, as Mr. Trivet stated, is consistent with what we've done in the past to protect the watershed. And I agree, these are two areas that could be prime for development.
Yes, I agree. I think this is really important, and thinking about even not development, but any agricultural use or anything like that could also negatively impact the water supply. So I think in order to make sure that development or not, or other kinds of use, we would want to make sure that we are taking actions to protect the water supply for our citizens.
And I'm in agreement too. I think if you read the agenda item and recognize the history of Watermill, I'm continually amazed by the foresight that your predecessor had many, many years ago. And so I think it's important to us to continue to protect and preserve our water supply.
And I agree, the parcels are kind of unique to me because one of which, the one on the left, is our view, has probably a high agricultural potential, and that would lead towards runoff depending on what type of animals you may be cultivating there. And then directly abutting the one on the right is other real estate development. So both of which have that high potential, but for different reasons. And I think it's, again, a strategic purchase of ours.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council approve the purchase of 367 East Rochambeau and 801 Greg Lane for a total of $935,000.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Next is item E, consideration and action regarding the proposed resolution 23-08, amending the capital improvement fund for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, to recognize the additional urban maintenance fund from the Virginia Department of Transportation. Ms. Dameron, welcome again.
Thank you. We've received additional urban maintenance funds of $173,600 from VDOT. Staff's requesting that council appropriate that funding in the capital improvement plan in the repaving program.
I like grants, and so I think we should accept them. There's no question. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Yes, I move that City Council approve Resolution 23-08 as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, when you're ready.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Okay. Item 10 is an item of closed session. Mr. Dent, do you have a motion for us?
I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds and discussion of the terms and scope of such contract where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body per subparagraph 29.
Second?
Thank you, Ms. McKay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to go into closed session. When that concludes, we'll come back out and we'll conclude the meeting. Back in open session. Mr. Vice Mayor?
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Thank you, Ms. McKay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Okay, is there any other business to come before council?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
You're adjourned.